and welcome to NPC Sports, the inaugural edition of a podcast dedicated to a couple individuals, at least two-thirds of whom are out of the sports industry at the moment, but who have a long history together at a former high-profile regional sports media outlet. My name is Ben Watanabe. I am your host. I'm joined by two illustrious gentlemen. Do you want to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, my name's Dakota Randall. As Ben alluded to, I have a history with both Ben and Logan, working at a certain illustrious regional sports network. Covered variety of sports over the last 10 years, including the last 4 years as a Patriots beat reporter, and currently am thoroughly enjoying the unemployment line.
Yeah, I'm Logan Mullen. I'm the only person contributing to society right now. I am an editor at Odyssey after have we used illustrious after an illustrious run at a former or a current but former for us regional sports network.
So I think, what I hope this podcast show can be is, aside from being three yahoos talking about sports, which is, not a unique place, is that, all three of us come with various levels of experience in sports media and around sports. So in addition to kind of bringing our perspective as sports fans, we also bring that kind of insider knowledge, and hopefully at times we'll be able to get into not just the storylines, but also like how we understand how the storylines are being framed, and what is realistic and what is not, based on what we've done in the past when we were in those shoes. So I want to get started right off the bat. We're going to focus on Boston area sports. There's a lot going on this week, but this is hot stove season for baseball. Pitchers and catchers are getting ready to report. Spring training begins this month. And the Red Sox have made some moves. I think by and large people have been happy with the moves they've made pitching wise. But the lineup still bears some improvement. They've been connected with Alex Bregman, recently been reconnected with Nolan Arenado. The question I'll put to both of you guys is, do you feel that the Red Sox offensively have improved from where they were at last year?
Yeah, I think so. And I don't think, but it's just not in a way that I think many fans are conditioned to view it. And that's maybe largely based on sports talk radio or just the nature of sports media now, where everyone kind of puts all their eggs in the offseason free agency or trade basket. And that's certainly a big part of it. But, I think this is true for all four sports, that the most discounted variable every year is internal development, and just accounting for the possibility of players you already have taking a step forward. But you have to do it realistically, right? Like, you wouldn't look at this Red Sox team and say, well, what if Willie Abreu turns into an MVP candidate? You can't reasonably suggest that. But you could say, what if Tristan Cassis hits 40 home runs? That's a realistic thing that could happen. And then you start laying out all those variables, and you say how many need to break their way for them to exceed expectations or go the other way. And I just think, in addition to the players they have added, Garrett Crochet and Walker Buehler to the rotation, I think those are big additions. I think, speaking of those variables, Lucas Giolito, the chance of him coming back and being a serviceable 3 or 4, if that breaks their way, that's huge. And then on the offensive side of the ball, I've seen some writing this week that the Red Sox on paper are worse than last season. And maybe that's true if you just look at them on paper in the final week of September. But if you just look at them overall in a season where they basically didn't have Tristan Cassis or Trevor Story, and Rafael Devers was dealing with injuries throughout the year, just the fact that all those guys are back and healthy, I think makes them, at least from the jump, better than they were on paper on offense for much of last season. And then, again, those variables, Roman Anthony, Christian Campbell, when you're talking about two guys that are top 5 prospects in baseball that are basically on the cusp of big league promotion. We're not talking about guys in Double-A or Single-A. They're ready to contribute right now, and they're basically, among the 2 or 3 favorites to win Rookie of the Year. If you get Rookie of the Year quality seasons from either of those guys, that is more than enough to replace someone like Tyler O'Neill, who is, kind of seen as the big offensive loss in the offseason. So I just think across the board, the Red Sox are better than last year. I think they have been making steady improvements over the last 3 or 4 years, and I fully expect them to compete for the AFC East this season if they
AFC
stay
East?
healthy. So
Yeah, the East.
the
They have a
AFC
better.
East, the American League East, I think they should compete in that division. If they don't, I think that's a disappointment.
I feel like the stupidest person in the world for feeling this way, but you mentioned the like internal improvements. I keep waiting for the full season of Trevor's story, and I'm like, I still have a shred of belief that he could at least be a competent offensive player for them. And if nothing else, he would like if Trevor Story is good enough to relegate Rafaela to a super utility role. I would say that is a net positive for the Red Sox because that means Story's bat was good enough. Like we know the defense will play, that's not a problem. I also have a little bit of trepidation about throwing too many eggs in the Roman Anthony basket, especially since I doubt that he will begin the season with the team. But at the same time, like that seems like someone whose bat will play right off the bat and will be a meaningful contributor relatively soon. I mean, Wilyer Abreu essentially came out of nowhere last year and became your everyday right fielder, which to the Tyler O'Neill point, everyone's kind of clamoring about the loss of his bat. And, that is not an insignificant loss. But at the same time, that's someone who struggled a lot with injuries last year and wasn't always a staple in the lineup. So, you kind of learn to live without him. One might say that if they actually use Masataka Yoshida correctly, they maybe would have gotten a little bit more offensive production there. So I do agree with your overarching point, Dakota, that like the internal improvement suggests to me that the offense will be better. You're basically banking on them getting some sort of boon from what's already there to offset the loss of Tyler O'Neill if the roster stays the way it is now. If they get Arenado, I think you kind of throw, or Bregman for that matter, even though I'm a little bit more, I don't know, wary of signing Alex Bregman. But there's, if they got worse, it's not by a whole lot just because they lost Tyler O'Neill.
Yeah, and one thing I would quickly add to that is I just think the only thing about them that I don't love is the bullpen, and even there, not to keep hammering the whole variables thing, but you do have interesting guys in that bullpen. Most notably, someone like Luis Guerrero, who has developed as a closer. That I think it's possible that some guys take steps forward and solidify those roles at least until the trade deadline, when maybe they can go out and get a closer they need if they still need one. But I think an underrated part of them is their depth. I really like the depth on the offense because you're basically going into it where your depth infielders are Romy Gonzalez, who I think is a good player. Like, I think that's a classic one where, like, if they brought up Romy Gonzalez on Felger and Maz, they make fun of him, but he's actually a good player.
Yeah.
And I think David Hamilton is a solid depth infielder. And then your other top depth, at least to start, are two of the top 5 prospects in baseball. So it's really just the depth at catcher that might be an issue, but even that's not too bad with Navarez. So I just think across the board, they're better, they're deeper. The ceiling is higher based on the prospects coming up. It's really just the bullpen. And, I think they can figure that out, at least until they reach a breaking point when maybe they do have to trade for a reliever. And they certainly have the prospect capital to get that done. So maybe I'm too bullish on the Red Sox, but I think they're going in the right direction despite the popular opinion.
No, I hear you. The Romy Gonzalez thing was funny because he was like, at times last year when their infield was an absolute mess, he was almost like, we have an adult who can come in and play some innings and just make a routine out. And the Tyler O'Neill loss, I want to back up what Logan was saying. Yeah, it's a loss, but don't forget, a huge reason about why Tyler O'Neill was so valuable was just because he happened to hit right-handed. Look, like, why did they make a multi-year commitment to Rob Refsnyder? Because he hits right-handed. Like, they were just in such need of any right-handed bat that Tyler O'Neill, if by dint of being a right-handed bat in the middle of a very left-handed lineup, he probably saw some pitchers he wouldn't have seen, if he wasn't sandwiched between four lefties. So yeah, it's a loss, but it was a loss built on the circumstances as much as it is on the player, in my opinion. And yeah, I think the point of the internal development is a great one. Wilyer Abreu, obviously, we didn't know he was going to turn into a Gold Glover. And I guess I am more likely to hitch my expectations to Roman Anthony making a quick adjustment to the big leagues, simply because there's nothing to this point that we've seen to show us he can't. Then I am to believe that suddenly injury prone players are going to become uninjury prone, and that's one of those things that just historically, if you're a Trevor Story, once a player becomes injury prone, they kind of stay that way. And there are some exceptions, but I feel that it's almost a bigger stretch to say, oh, Trevor Story stays healthy for a full year, than to say, oh, maybe one of these young guys comes in and they're able to play right away.
Yeah, the thing about Trevor Story that's tough is, like not all injury prone players are created equally. Like, is it they're not like Luka Doncic, to cross sports, right? Is he injury or prone because of freak injuries and accidents, or because he's in poor condition and a bit of a slob? Probably the latter, right? Whereas Trevor Story and maybe even Chris Sale, there are some freak injuries put in there. Hunter Henry, someone that comes to mind who dealt with really sort of freak injuries early in his career and then basically hasn't missed a game since joining the Patriots, and kind of put that narrative behind him. So which one is Trevor's Story? I think it might be more freak accidents, which leads me to at least have hope that he can stay healthy for this whole season. Though at the same time, we don't even know like what a full healthy season of Trevor's Story looks like at this point. Like, True. Is it prime Trevor's Story? Is it 240 with 20 homers and Gold Glove defense, which is probably fine. I don't really know what to expect from him, even if he stays healthy. So he's kind of a tough one for me.
Yeah, he is. And, I'm glad you brought up the Chris Sale thing, because I was opposed to that trade because it was the first offseason. Like, Chris Sale everyone could see injuries were coming, and eventually the Tommy John thing happened. But after that, it was a series of freak injuries. He fell off the bike. He got hit by that, hit on the hand by that comebacker. And so last offseason, I didn't want them to trade him because I thought this is probably the 1 year where you might actually have the best version of him, because he had a normal offseason. And sure enough, they trade him for Vaughn Grissom, and he goes and has a good year and gets a quick extension from the Braves, and it pans out. So my thing with Trevor's Story is I am of the belief that some of this is freak injury related, especially last year, the injury that he had in Anaheim. So, I keep expectations tempered. I don't think that he is going to be the Red Sox savior, and I certainly think that there's a world where Marcelo Meyer is here in the next year and a half and Trevor Story is essentially banished. But at the same time, he's under contract. You're paying him. There is a vision for him. He's how old is he now? He's probably early 30s, right?
Yeah.
So 32, something like that. So might as well see what you have. I mean, you signed him to be a star. He's not going to be a star, but he could be a competent bat. And when he's been healthy, the defense has been good. So that's worth something.
Well, I'll pose this question to you guys then. What do you, of Anthony and Campbell, who are you more comfortable banking on for this season? And my personal take is Anthony, even though I think of the two, he has a better chance of starting the season in the minors. But I think him because he doesn't have platoon splits. He's shown the ability to hit lefties just fine, and he gets on base a lot, which is one of the reasons why I always felt good about Tristan Casas coming into the big leagues, because his approach to the plate was so good. And on the other side, Campbell, I'm not a scout, or I don't spend all my time in Baseball Savant, but it seems like the one hang up that a lot of these people ranking prospects have on him, the one last hang up, is that he's got a very unorthodox swing. A lot of people compare him to Hunter Pence and say that there's really only one Hunter Pence that's made that kind of weird, unorthodox swing work at a high level. You know what? Maybe he comes out and pitchers learn how to attack that weird swing, and then there's an adjustment period for him. So maybe he takes a little bit longer than someone like Roman Anthony. But I'm just curious, of the two, who you guys think has a better chance to meet expectations this season?
I agree on Anthony. I'm also, this might be a me problem, I'm generally skeptical of sudden risers.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah. So like, I don't doubt that Christian Campbell will be a very useful player, but there is something to me where it's like, so last year this guy was barely on anyone's radar, and now we're fast tracking him to the big leagues.
Yeah, like is he Mookie Betts? Because like that's the last unprecedented rise for someone.
And that's what people always say. Well, he could be the next Mookie Betts. I don't care. Like, is he Mookie Betts? Like, Mookie Betts might just be a unicorn. You don't make moves hoping that he's a once in a generation talent. So yeah, that's my thing. Is I could see Roman Anthony has had the pedigree for a while, where you see, you can probably feel pretty comfortable putting him up against big league pitching and knowing that the at bats will be good enough. I can sooner see a situation where Campbell ends up getting called up, is completely overmatched, and then what happens? Did you wreck the guy's confidence, and then you're sending him right back to the minors? So that would be my doubt there.
Yeah, 100%. Hey, go ahead. Sorry,
what were you gonna say then?
No, I was going to have us move on, but I don't know if you had another final thought on the Red Sox.
My only final thought that I think is interesting for the Red Sox is there's a non-zero chance that by midseason their entire lineup is homegrown, because you could have left to right some version of Duran, Rafaela, Abreu, or Anthony, and then in the infield, Devers, potentially Marcelo Meyer, Campbell, Cassis, and then Connor Wong at catcher. Like I'd be curious to know the last time the Red Sox or any big league team like fielded an entirely homegrown lineup. Well,
there are probably some terrible teams you could find that fielded a homegrown lineup.
True, but a homegrown of all good prospects. Like I don't know. It's just kind of weird. I don't know the last time
a team that ostensibly is competing and fielding a team of almost entirely homegrown players does feel fairly unprecedented.
Yeah, Astros maybe.
Yeah.
All right, yeah. So let's switch gears a little bit from a team that's trying to get back into relevance to one that is maybe arguably the only relevant team still in the Boston market, the Boston Celtics, who are on the block. I don't know if you guys have your bids in as of yet. I think they turned mine down. It didn't meet the reserve at last check on eBay. But how big of a alteration to this franchise do you guys think is going to be for a new ownership group coming in? Obviously, one that the group that's been led by the Grousebecks has been stewards for a long time. To hear them tell it, they've won 17 world championships in the last 16 years, as opposed to a grand total of 2. But when you're looking at the ownership situation, is there anything that this current crop of players should be concerned about or watching as a new ownership group starts to come in?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Luka Doncic trade is very relevant to Celtics fans, or could be anyway. I know some of the prevailing national narrative is they boil it down to something as simple as the Mavericks don't want to hitch their wagons to a player like Luka who can't stay in shape, doesn't approach the game the right way, and they're just wary of giving a supermax contract to someone like that. And they think that Anthony Davis is a better fit for them right now because that gives them the size to compete in the West. I mean, I'm sure maybe that's part of the basketball justification of it, but I think, from a business perspective, I think it's another indication of, the NBA is kind of getting in the NBA right now is kind of bad business. I mean, these supermax deals are brutal, and the luxury tax penalties are significant. I mean, they're no joke, and we've seen a lot of teams recently doing their best to avoid getting into those penalties, and a lot of people have been looking at the Celtics as after this season as potentially big changes coming because of the financials. And so I just wonder, I don't think they're going to trade Jason Tatum, but I just wonder whether they're going to have to go through a soft reset here, depending on how the new ownership group looks at it. Like, are they going to come in and be one of the very few owners that just doesn't care and says, we'll pay the tax penalty because we put winning above all else, and we'll make the money back by just being relevant and selling jerseys and everything? Or do they go maybe what the Mavs are doing right now, which is not wanting to spend that much money, especially if they have questions about the superstars. And so I do wonder if they're gonna have to consider trading someone like Jaylen Brown, as I think the more likely candidate. Maybe as soon as in the next week or so. I don't think that's going to happen, but It wasn't so long ago where 2 years ago when Jaylen Brown signed that extension and everybody sort of reading the tea leaves of the deal said, well, this just, makes it easier to envision his exit or trade in a couple of years. Then they win the championship and everyone's talking about Tatum and Brown being together long term. But I think it's still totally possible for the Celtics to decide to trade someone like Jaylen Brown. And depending on how the new ownership feels, that might be the better business decision.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like every week Jaylen Brown is pissed off about something new or making some sort of cryptic comment. So I would think that he would probably be the one to go. And at the same time, like, maybe the lesson from the Luka Doncic trade is like shop your stars, because the Jimmy Butler situation, Miami's clearly going haywire. Like that should scare any owner. And like obviously Jimmy Butler is a unicorn insofar as he has done this type of thing pretty much everywhere he's been to force his way out. So it's like, I'm not saying that you have to expect that to be a common thing, but more so than any other league, stars get traded.
Unicorn count is at 2 for Logan, by the way.
Okay,
Betts and Jimmy Butler. Unicorn.
Okay,
I'll
unicorns. Stop with the unicorns.
I forgot unicorn episode.
Not a unicorn if there's multiple, I guess. But so
if you have 2 unicorns, you don't have one. It's like quarterbacks.
And now I have horses with horns on their heads on the brain. I'm trying to get back on track here. Shop your stars, right? So the Mavericks, like maybe Anthony Davis for the next 4 months, that is a better move for the Mavericks than Luka Doncic, especially if they don't think they can trust him long term. But it is just as a practical matter, it makes no sense to trade for a guy who, like, if you're worried about Luka Doncic's durability, are you really going to get Anthony Davis, who's injured every game or exits every game, like a historically not durable player who is now older and in the back end of his career? So it's
been more durable the last 2 seasons, but yes,
so
you're right.
To the point we've been making about injury prone players don't suddenly not become injury prone, that I would have a hard time believing, okay, 2 years he's been healthy. It's like the same thing with Trevor Story. It's like, all right, the Rockies had a couple healthy years of Trevor Story down at the end. It's like, well, that's probably coming because that's the type of player he is. So the point being, though, is that who would have thought that Anthony Davis and just some first-round picks would have been enough to get that deal done? So if you're the Celtics and you have Jaylen Brown, who at any given point could have a foot out the door, because that does kind of seem to be his MO, is at least making cryptic comments or being unhappy in some way, why would you not see what the market is for him? Because if teams are as stupid as the Mavs seem to be and willing to trade talents like Doncic, it's the nature of the league. I don't see anything wrong with that.
So just a contract set. So essentially Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and Derek White are signed through the end of 2029. Derek White has a player option for that year for $34 million. But I can't see him not taking that. I know he's improved, but given where he'll be in his career, I feel like a $34 million AAV might be the big most he can get for that year. I might be wrong. Holiday is signed effectively through 2028 because he also has a player option. And there's no way that Drew Holiday at that stage of his career is not going to take that player option. Yeah, you've got a lot invested in those guys, and that's without Kristaps Porzingis. Obviously, it's without Al Horford, who at that his contract is up after this year. So, but there's a lot of money tied up, and the best way to get out from under that situation, where Derek White and Drew Holiday, White might be movable at that point. I don't think Holiday is going to be movable.
It's gonna be like 37.
Yeah, trading Brown or Tatum is the easiest way, money-wise, to alleviate that problem.
But to the point about ownership, so I think after the Grosbecks have done this whole thing about we're not the owners, we're fans, yeah. I think it would be so disingenuous if they sold it to someone who is looking to tear it down. Like, if there is a basketball justification for trading it, but to Dakota's point earlier of like, if it's someone who's like, I don't care about the luxury tax, I'm just going to spend, like, as far as I'm concerned, if the Grosbecks are people of their word, then like that should be the only person you would sell the team to.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so the thing is though about the contracts, the contracts currently, I don't think they're not that big of a deal, but they will become a big deal this summer, which I think maybe it's in July when the new tax threshold kicks into place that makes the penalties significantly more severe. So yeah, right now all those like those guys signed being through 2028, 2029. Um, it's not necessarily like a big deal for the Celtics, but it's about to be in 4 or 5 months. So that's why I just wonder, are they going to get out ahead of it? Are they going to react to it? Um, and so my thing is like, I look at them and it's like, do you get out ahead of it now or sooner rather than later and trade Jaylen Brown when his value probably is as high as it's ever been? Or do you just try to ride it out with Tatum and Brown, and then by the time you reach those their contracts run out, and you try and trade Jaylen Brown when he has 1 year left, you're not going to get nearly as much in return. I think there are arguments, for both of them, because maybe the best thing is to ride it out with Tatum and Brown and keep augmenting them with solid players rather than what they have now, which is really like 5 all-stars in their starting lineup.
Yeah. There's also the possibility that by 2029, $70 million a year for an NBA star might not be all that, it might not be outlandish. There's a chance
Right.
it might be more outlandish, depending on where the next round of TV money and the CBA ends
Kind of what
up.
I'm wondering.
What's that?
But that's what I'm wondering is the TV money. Will that be? That might be an outlandish number at that
Yeah,
point.
exactly. Yeah. But there's our situations, once upon a time, it seemed like an outlandish amount of money to pay, Michael Jordan in 1991. By 1997, he was a bargain.
Well, I think the fascinating sidebar to this whole thing for me is, what owner is going to sign on for this whole thing, paying those kind of tax penalties, without owning the building.
Yeah,
the Celtics don't own the
Yeah.
building, and so my assumption is just that, or my wonder is that is someone going to come in and try and buy the Celtics, with the plan of, I don't know if they could just buy the building from the Bruins, or would they try and, what a lot of people speculate is, try and develop a new one out in Everett or something, or in the Seaport district, or whatever, to try and recoup some of those, some of that money that they're spending on the roster, by concert revenue, event revenue, whatever it may be. I think there's a decent chance that, with a new owner for the Celtics, could potentially come plans for a new building, which would just, I don't know, it'd be interesting to see what that would look like.
Yeah, 100%. I think the new building thing is absolutely on the table. I mean, we've seen, look at the Crafts. They're trying to move into the political realm. In my opinion, about 65% of that is motivation of wanting to build a soccer stadium in
100%.
Boston.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, and there's a lot of places. I mean, you mentioned the Seaport. I'm sure that people are priming stuff in. There's obviously the practice facility that they built. Chinatown. People have been trying to develop that for sports forever. So yeah, 100%. I feel like whoever takes control of it, their next question is going to be, where can we build a new arena? And the answer might be nowhere, but that's definitely going to be a question that they ask.
Have you guys heard the conspiracy theory on why the Dallas ownership moved on from Luka?
No, if there's a conspiracy theory, trust us. We rely on you to tell us.
we only go through verified sources, so let us know what you're hearing.
Yeah, I want to make sure I don't butcher it, but I think basically the way it is that the ownership group now that Mark Cuban sold the majority to, I forget their last names, but they're big casino people. They're big betting people, and there currently isn't any betting allowed in Texas. So their plan is to trade Doncic, save face by getting someone like Anthony Davis, but really, in essence, degrade the Mavs to a point where they can realistically threaten to relocate them, because it's easier to relocate a team when they're bad, right? And then by threatening to relocate the Mavs, the family can lobby the state to push through legalized gambling and betting so that they can actually build casinos in Texas.
Where would they threaten to move besides Dallas?
They bought the team like a year and a half ago. Why wouldn't you just wait and buy a team that actually could be relocated? Like, Dallas is a major market.
Well, no, but that's the point is like they want to force the state to push through gambling so that this I forget the last name of the families, but they're huge casino people that they can put casinos in Texas. And that in a way to sort of bribe the state, they'll be like, well, we're going to relocate the Mavericks, who are a revenue generator, if you don't push through gambling. And it's easier to realistically threat relocation if the team stinks. And a good way
Well,
to make the team stink is to trade their generational talent. I'm not
yeah,
saying it was a credible conspiracy
well-founded
theory, but it's fun.
Yeah, I mean, I take it from somebody who lived in Texas for 18 years. Unless there's Jesus thrown behind it, I don't think that government's going to start just popping up casinos because they're threatening to move the Mavericks. You can't do a damn thing in that state in the first place. So I'd be hard pressed to believe that's going to come to pass.
Best thing I heard is this is the second time an LBJ has been the direct beneficiary of a murder from Dallas.
Oh yeah, that's tough but true.
I guess, well, real quick, what would you guys do if the plan was to somewhat break up the Celtics? What would your path be?
I mean,
Mine personally would be trade
hand the
Jaylen
keys to
Brown for the
Peyton
next
Pritchard.
3-and-D guy, or the next stretch big is what I would do.
Yeah, it would definitely be trading Jaylen Brown.
But for what kind of asset? Because I think like you have to look for life after Kristaps Porzingis. And I don't know who that is, if it's a Karl Anthony Towns, but
well, and the problem too is that okay, so if you're trading Jaylen Brown, you need someone young because we were just going through the contract. So, well, I'd say within the next 3 years, Horford's going to be retired. Drew Holiday's 34 already, so he's closer to the end than the beginning. The other three guys are up in 2029. So, like, if you trade Jaylen Brown, it has to be the not a yes, a win now move, but also not a win now move. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what an apt comparison would be, but like if you truly believe Jaylen Brown's like a top 15 player in the NBA, like you have to get equal value. Maybe they
like
call
Brown for Sabonis, someone like Brown for Sabonis or some that being the focus of it. Because I just think
I wouldn't.
NBA, you need someone like Porzingis these days. Maybe not that good, but you need a stretch big who is dynamic, or certainly helps a lot. Or maybe I just think if you're the Celtics, you could say we need that more than we need two elite wings.
I don't know. I wouldn't be thinking players. I know Danny Ainge isn't here anymore, but if I'm going to trade Jaylen Brown, I'm thinking picks because I don't think that there's a world that you get a player who brings what Jaylen Brown does at a better price point than Jaylen Brown does. The only way that you potentially get that is a rookie, someone on a rookie contract, so to speak. So, and I think once upon a time when he was on an expiring deal or near the end, you could have moved him for like a Lauri Markkanen or somebody. But like now those deals are like, those are not going to happen because you're moving a guy there's a lot of years dedicated to him. No team is going to be swapping that when they have to look at paying him 60, 65, 71 million over the remainder of this deal.
I do agree with the picks portion. To me, though, it's like, why not both? Like, if you have because like the Mavs only got 3 firsts for Doncic, right? So like you would presumably get, and I think the Suns sent 4 firsts for Durant. So it's like, all right, say you trade Jaylen Brown this offseason, like you have to at least get the 26 and 28 firsts, probably the 30, maybe the 32, which at that point, that probably is valuable because you start looking past 2029 and like, all right, we're getting 5-6 years down the road now, but it's like, you should have some justifiable concerns about what your team will look like, especially if White and one of Tatum or Brown walks. So yeah, I do agree with that premise, Ben, that like just go for the picks. And, the Mavs still got a competent player in Anthony Davis in addition to the picks. So someone younger like Brown, who would be under contract for a little while, I don't see why you couldn't get a haul that included both competent player, if not players, and picks.
With the Luka and AD trade and how wild that was fresh in mind, I'm just saying, call Denver. See how that ownership group feels about the tax threshold coming up, and see, what will it take to get Jokic? You can't hurt to call. That's what I would do.
Well, I mean, if you want to make the point about not being dialed in enough or whatever that they say about Doncic, like Jokic makes no bones about the fact that basketball is not his favorite thing. So, like, if you like, maybe that's the angle you play it at, but that wouldn't concern me.
Yeah.
Yeah, he handles it fine.
All right, let's pivot again from breaking up one of the few teams that has a realistic chance of winning another NBA championship this year to the Super Bowl. It's Super Bowl week. Yay, the big game, as it's called, if you look at any non NFL affiliated media.
I've been doing a lot of big game this week.
The big game. Uh, Listen, there's nothing you can say about the Super Bowl with the 2 weeks, especially midway through Radio Row week, that probably has not been said ad nauseum. But we do have the Chiefs. They're going for a three-peat. That would be unprecedented in the Super Bowl era. They are stalking the specter of the Patriots dynasty. We have a rematch from 2 years ago between the Eagles and the Chiefs. What take could you guys possibly have related to any of those things or anything else that might be unique based on the media blitz that is Super Bowl week?
That's tough. I don't know. I don't really have one. I would just say that I am rooting for the Eagles, not because I'm one of these people that's protective of the Patriots dynasty, but more so like it. I just hate when storylines are beaten to the ground, and if the Chiefs win, it's just going to be nonstop, whether it's online or on TV, comparing Mahomes to Brady and all this stuff, and I just find it entirely uninteresting and exhausting, and so I don't want them to win for that reason. Um, as far as whether the comparisons are justified, uh, I think the Mahomes Brady one is the closest. I'm not putting Reed with Belichick yet, and I just don't even think Travis Kelce and Rob Gronkowski is a fair comparison because I just think they're two completely different players that play the position in completely different ways. That I just think it's a faulty comparison from the start.
Yeah, I really have no juice for the the comparison stuff. I mean, it is. I do find it interesting that they went from the Patriots basically running the AFC for 2 decades to the Chiefs. Like that, I do find that a little bit fascinating, if for no other reason than it's a interesting coincidence. But like, I don't know, those debates are just so nebulous. So I just want it all to stop. I also the Eagles bother me. Like, I don't know. I find Nick Sirianni annoying. I don't know if he's genuine or not, but he is just a strain on me. His whole shtick. So like, there's
Crying during the anthem? You didn't like crying during the anthem?
yeah, this might surprise you. I'm not big about crying during the anthem. But yeah, I mean that whatever. He can cry during the anthem. Chris Jones will be doing it too, so like they can have a sob off before the game. Um, but I don't know. Like Travis Kelsey's a doofus. I can't stand him either. Having the Kelsey brothers shoved down our throats nonstop just isn't exciting to me. So yeah, I badly wanted like Commanders Bills or the Lions to be involved or something like that. And so it's just I don't even have takes. I just have apathy about I've literally in my 30 years of existence, I've never had less excitement for a Super Bowl than this.
I guess my take that I'll throw out is I don't think the Chiefs are very good. Or I
Agree
don't
with
think they're that good. I think, and I'm just talking in totality. I think like that the initial incarnation of the Chiefs with Tyreek Hill was the closest thing I watched to like, wow, this, if this keeps going, this is as impressive to watch as the Patriots were. Because, and sure, there's something to be said about, how good of winners they are, which absolutely is true, winning all those one-score games. But there's also just, maybe this is just revisionist history, but I feel like there are so many more games with the Chiefs over the last few years where they look less impressive in their victories than the Patriots did during their best years. It's really just Mahomes to Kelsey. There's not that extra connection or two that Brady had that you'd be like, wow, like you can't stop any of this stuff. They have Chris Jones on defense and a good cornerback in McDuffie, but I feel like the Patriots had throughout the years way more like high end defensive players that could do a lot more. I don't know. I'm just going on pure eye test. When I watch the Chiefs at their best during this run, it just doesn't impress me as much as when the Patriots were doing their thing. But I don't really have a lot to back that up other than just pure subjectiveness.
I do agree that they don't seem as good. Like this seems like a very beatable Chiefs team. This is the
Like,
one.
I think prime Patriots like wipes the floor with prime Chiefs, but
Yeah,
with
maybe.
Mahomes
Here's the way I guess here's what when the Giants beat the Patriots, it was a legitimate shock, right? If the Eagles beat the Chiefs, will it be a legitimate shock?
No, I think
no.
Eagles.
So I think that kind of backs up what you're saying. When the Eagles beat the Patriots, it was a legitimate shock.
Right.
Yeah, the one
was
piece,
more about the Eagles.
What's that?
Like that the legitimate shock for when the Eagles beat the Patriots is the fact that the Patriots let third string Nick Foles beat them. Than the fact that like the Patriots were this unbeatable force that year.
Right, but my point was that when the Patriots did end up losing in those Super Bowls, like there was legitimate like wow, like I can't believe Eli of all people did that. The piece of it that I think misses some of the point is people say, well, if the Chiefs win 3 in a row, Brady and Belichick never did that. I think that misses the point a lot because so much of the Patriots' impressiveness was that it was over an extended period of time. Like, no team has won 3 straight Super Bowls before, but many have won 3 and 4 years, and many have won, multiple in a short amount of time. I think the Niners won 4 in 8 years, I think. The Cowboys won 3 in 4 years. So these short kind of bursts, even the Broncos win in 2. These happen. These are not unprecedented. Mike Shanahan was once lauded as a genius because of what he did with the Broncos. So to say, well, the Patriots never won 3 in a row, no, but they won 3 and 4, and then they turned around and had 2 more iterations of a dynasty. The middle iteration just happened to not win a Super Bowl. So I feel like saying, well, that misses the point of the Patriots dynasty entirely if you're just dismissing the fact that Brady never won 3 in a row.
Yeah. I don't care that much about that.
That's a great approach to bring to a podcast about sports, is to say I don't care. This is going to be good content. Like, I'll clip this for the YouTube shorts.
Well, it's just like, am I really supposed to care that Tom Brady did it 3 times in 4 years and Mahomes is going to do it 3 times, like 3 straight times? I think Mahomes on his day is a far more talented quarterback than Brady ever was. I also think Brady is the smartest quarterback that ever existed. So whatever skills he lacked that Mahomes had, he offset by the fact that he was just so smart and sees the game better than anyone else ever did at the position. But it's just sort of like, we're still in the middle of the Mahomes experience. If the Chiefs continue on this run for another 5 years, then like the Brady argument will be null. Like there will not be disputing it. And so to litigate this right now when Patrick Mahomes is 28 or 29, however old he is, to me is just like I'm sorry, I cannot give a shit right now what order they win it in.
I guess another way that you could stack it up and is how many Hall of Fame or fringe Hall of Fame players played for the Patriots over the course of that run, and how many have played for the Chiefs during this run. And granted, obviously smaller sample size, but I just don't know how many. I mean, Chris Jones, Kelsey, Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, who's gone, and then maybe like I saw someone make a case for Joe Tooney the other day, and it's actually pretty strong when you look at it in terms of all pros and how good he's been. But that's really it. Like it's not like they've had a lot of these sort of premium players. Maybe that is more to the credit to Reed and everything they've been able to do. But
I feel like the dialogue's shifting now because wasn't the whole thing with the Patriots that like they could get pretty much whoever and find these undrafted free agents and like I agree, like when you have like Devin McCourty and Teddy Bruschi and all these people over the course of time, like sure, but weren't the Patriots, like I think it would be a credit to the Chiefs if they are this dominant despite not brimming with Hall of Famers. But wasn't that the argument that was kind of made with the Patriots for a long time?
I've always thought that as much as I like Reed, he is almost too good at getting the most out of particularly his offensive players, and it's to the detriment of the personnel side. I mean, even look when he was with the Eagles. I mean, his two best offensive players were Donovan McNabb and Brian Westbrook. And they're until they got Terrell Owens, they never had wide receivers or of import. And that was great. Westbrook, great, amazing pass catcher. Productive player. McNabb, very accomplished as an NFC quarterback. But yeah, it always seemed like one of those things. It's like, well, we're good enough. We're getting enough out of this to get us to the NFC Championship game with the Chiefs. We're doing this enough that we're able to be in the Super Bowl perennially. But it's not necessarily getting the top end talent. Now it's with the Chiefs. It hasn't mattered because he has Pat Mahomes. But to your point, I don't know if their individual players have been to that same caliber.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. That's an interesting point you make about Reed, that he's almost too good for his own good on offense. Where I think you could say the same thing about Belichick during the 10-year gap, is that he was so good at getting so much out of the defense that he did leave him dry on that side of the ball too many times. I mean, you had Julian Edelman playing safety in the Super Bowl, for God's sakes, and for a long time there, the defense kind of did become the issue because they played this bend but don't break style. Where they would give up a lot of field goals and they weren't just dominating teams, and they were just relying on Brady to make up the difference, and usually he did. But in some of those seasons that, the second Super Bowl against the Giants, some of those playoff games against the Broncos and the Ravens, I think Belichick left the defense too shorthanded and thought that he could just, coach his way through it. And he was to a certain point, but ultimately, I think it hurt them in some of those seasons.
Yeah, or believing that you could win a Super Bowl without, your best cornerback.
Right. Yeah. Well, there you go.
Well, also, ironically, like that putting Malcolm Butler out for the play that ultimately established his career, it's one of those things that goes the other way. It's why do you have Malcolm Butler out there in that situation? Why are you leaving yourself short? So it does kind of go both ways there.
I do think it's a shame that it all ended the way it did, because it would be fun if the Patriots were potentially coming back on with Drake May and Belichick was still here, and we could see, let's see if the Patriots could come back and start challenging the Chiefs here over the next few seasons. It would have been fun to see what that would have looked like, but obviously it's not happening. Because I just don't think the Bills. I don't believe in Sean McDermott. I think he's not good enough for them in those spots. And I think the rest of the AFC is the same thing. I think the Chiefs are benefiting from what the Patriots did for so long, which is not ineptitude, but certainly just not being good enough from a coaching standpoint around the AFC. And it's just, I just don't know if anyone is going to be a serious challenger to them if the coaching stays the way it is in that conference.
Fair enough. All right, let's start putting the finishing touches on this inaugural episode. Want to figure out, as I mentioned off the top, because of our years in the industry, a lot of us have some moments, some memories, and a whole pile of things that we have written that we might or might not be proud of, but certainly takes that we have been crucified for, raked over the coals, fairly or unfairly. And so I wanted to open it up to the two of you to talk about what's a take that you remember being particularly, I say victimized, but it might have been fairly victimized. And so I'll go off the top. The one that I remember, a really tough one for a while was in the 2014 draft, I believe the Andrew Wiggins year. I can't remember if there was actual trade conversations or something like that, but somehow him and Klay Thompson ended up getting connected somehow. And I wrote at that time, was covering the NBA, that Klay Thompson's ceiling is nowhere near what Andrew Wiggins is. And that was before Andrew Wiggins had ever played in the NBA at all. And I just remember because for the remainder of my time covering the NBA, it did not look very good for Mr. Wiggins. He was considered a gigantic bust after he was taken number 1 overall. And I think do you guys remember Zergnet?
Yes.
Zergnet, yeah.
So Zergnet, the reason it lived on for so long is, so I did hear about it on Twitter, but on Zergnet, and I don't know if this was an internal sabotage by someone at Nessun or this was just something that Zergnet did. So Zergnet basically would take if you ever go to a news story and you scroll down to the bottom and there's those little pictures that like doctors hate this one thing and there's a picture and they clickbaity, they want you to click on it. So Zergnet had a thing is like this writer thinks future Hall of Famer Klay Thompson is not as good as this draft bust or something like that. And so it lived on our website for a long time. And from time to time I would get tweets from people about it. And it was just funny because it was one of those things where I was like, I would prefer to forget about this, but my own website is continually throwing me under the bus by making sure that this lives here forever and ever.
Wasn't Wiggins' career revival in Golden State too?
Yeah,
Like,
but that happened
he was
much
great with
later.
the Warriors,
Yeah.
But I forget if that was where he had bounced back. But
Yeah.
with the help of Klay Thompson, what a full circle take.
So how about you guys?
So mine is a Nessun.com special. I think the relevant backstory here is, so the story I'm about to bring up, I wrote about 2 or 3 weeks before my last day at Nessun. When I was wrapping up my time there, I kind of decided that when I went to Odyssey, I would kind of scale back on Twitter a little bit. I would kind of scale back on some of how, let's say, how intensely I was writing some opinion pieces. Because I was just like, all right, I'm sort of tired of getting like very vitriolic things sent to me for having like a Celtics take. But so after the Patriots got pantsed by the Bills in the playoffs, the one Mac Jones playoff game, where it was like snowy in Buffalo and they just got shellacked. It was clear right off the jump they were going to get killed. The next day I was driving into the office and I was thinking like, I'm going to fire up like a Belichick shouldn't be back article. And I remember putting it into, I believe we were using Jira, not Basecamp at the time. And within seconds, both Dakota and Zach Cox had responded like, oh boy, like something like that. And, I was so ambivalent at that point. I was like, I don't give a shit. And so the headline I went with, which I stand by, and I think ultimately I bring this up because I was right, was Bill Belichick says he's staying. Are we sure that's best for the Patriots? This is January 16th, 2022. Okay. I got flamed. I mean, this literally went national. Will Brinson was making fun of me. Like all these people being like, yeah, run the greatest coach out of town, all this stuff. And the premise was largely around the fact of like, that you're so far gone that you cannot scale back his purview. And it is clear that he is incompetent as a GM now. Like, you cannot trust him to draft for you. Like, you just were exposed by the Bills. You're multiple pieces away. He's fumbled free agency. He cannot draft. You cannot let this guy run your team. If he wants to be the coach, fine, whatever. He shouldn't be, but just don't let him be the GM. And they let him be the GM, and the 2022 draft was an absolute debacle. And things got precipitously worse over the ensuing years because he kept making largely poor personnel moves. And so that was like as vile of things as I have ever received was in response to that, literally after they got waxed by the Bills in the postseason.
Nobody does a victory.
I remember that.
Nobody does a victory lap like Logan Mullen.
Yeah, I have rabbit ears. It's bad. I can remember. I keep receipts.
I also think just because you were right 2 years later doesn't mean you were right at the time.
You want to go through the 2022 draft? I'd be happy to.
I really don't.
No,
we could relitigate this for too long.
That's not revisionist history. They got that offseason. He hired Joe Judge and Matt Patricia and tanked Mac Jones's career. Like, he actively made him worse, the team worse that offseason.
Yeah. that doesn't mean I'm not doing this. I'm not doing
And then
this.
proceed to draft Cole Strange, Tyquan Thornton, Marcus Jones, Jack Jones, Pierre Strong, Bailey Zappi, Kevin Harris, Sam Roberts, Chasen Hines, and Andrew Stubner.
Stuber.
And that take was wrong at the time. It was right in the moment, and it's right now.
Okay. I don't want to relitigate the past. What I'm interested in here, what I'm interested in is the insults.
Yeah. I should have pulled more of them. I don't have my Twitter handy right now. Most of them, at that point, I had already been established as something of a pariah for like Patriots takes. And so there were a handful of like that corner of the internet who just like, I wrote something about the Patriots. They're just like, oh, this effing guy again. And so it was a lot of just like asshole, dickhead, like, that kind of stuff. More words than I care to use, but and then like actual writers like mocking it too. And it's like I knew it was going out on a limb in a way. I did not think it was as far fetched as people seem to think it was.
All right. Should I do mine?
I'm curious.
This was tough. There were a few I could do. I remember the same weird internet cult that used to rake you over the coals raked me over the coals like my first week on the beat because I sent out a reaction to a Sony Michel trade that admittedly I think it wasn't the most like nuanced or greatest take I've ever had, and so those people killed me for that one. I've been killed for maintaining that we still don't know whether the Red Sox were wrong to trade Mookie Betts, and I stand by that. We still don't know if that was the wrong move. We're gonna find out here going forward. I thought about going with my general Mac Jones apologist take, which I stand by, but I think that's tired at this point. So I'm gonna go with last spring when I was still working for Pro Football Network. They do their season predictor where you can go through and pick every game for the entire season and just kind of simulate it and have fun. And I was told to simulate the entire season, have some fun with it as a fun exercise, and sort of write a story off of it. And I remember I wrote it when my flight home from Orlando was delayed like 5 hours, so I was exhausted, and I kind of was like I had this like, F this attitude, and I just started like kind of going off the rails with it. And included in that was, I had the Commanders finishing like 2-15, and the Titans finishing like 1-16, and the Patriots finishing 9-8. And I got.
What were some of the wins you had?
Well, so I'll get. I forget now off the top of my head, but in the main thing that I was killed, this take has two parts of it. I stand by the Patriots bit, or the rationale. But the Titan stuff, I was vindicated on. I mean, I was just trying to pull up my mentions.
Yeah, you did make sure to
fans,
shoehorn that in there, that you picked that a team that everyone thought was going to be bad did end up being bad.
No, people thought the Titans were going to be good because they went out and got L'Jarius Sneed, Calvin Ridley, like all this stuff. Tony Pollard, and I thought they were going to stink, and they were. I mean, I can't even read the stuff people said to me. It was as vile as it gets on Twitter. But as far as the Patriots side of it, my rationale at the time was what I really thought is they were going to be like a 7-win team. And then I added 2 just for the sake of fun, bold prediction, because I didn't think it was that crazy. And my thought process was the team the previous season won 4 games and were in, they lost like 5 or so 1-score games. They were right there in a lot of them. And in a lot of cases, they lost because of inept quarterback play with crucial turnovers in key spots. And I just thought if you eliminated that variable and added a competent quarterback in Jacoby Brissett who wouldn't make those mistakes in those spots, and that you were returning the same defense that was among the best in the NFL, while adding some what we thought was decent talent in the draft, that you should win somewhere around 7 games. And so I stand by that rationale at the time, but obviously things changed when Christian Barmore had the blood clots, and then they traded Matthew Judon, and David Andrews got hurt. But I think the biggest thing that I miscalculated was how bad the coaching was. I mean, that ended up being, the chink in the armor of that take is the coaching just wasn't nearly good enough. I didn't think it was going to be that far of a downgrade, and it was. But I think
how many games did they
projecting
end
the
up winning?
Patriots to win 7 games back then was perfectly reasonable.
How many games did they end up winning?
3.
Okay.
No, 4. They won 4 again. That's right.
The one thing I will give you is
they were in a lot of games though. They lost a lot of 1-score games. You could squint again and see a 7-win team.
No, you couldn't. But
yes,
they the one thing I will give you is that I thought the defense, I'm squinting hard, and you know what? I see a 5-win team at best. But the one thing I will concede is that I was surprised the defense was as bad as they were, but that is something that happens when your offense can't stay on the field. Jacoby Brissett was competent, but that guy should have learned how to throw the ball away more. Like, sometimes I'd watch him just take a beating, and it's like, hey, man, like, this team stinks. You don't have to just stand in there and take that. Like, get out of the pocket and throw it away. But
I just think, well, I mean, if Jalen Polk gets his foot down against Miami, if Mayo goes with the right wind in overtime against the Titans, if Joey Sly doesn't miss the field goal against the Jaguars, I mean, those are all like right there. Either way, those are 3 wins right there, and all of a sudden they're at 7.
Sure,
and
but ultimately those are systemic problems, right? Like, you're talking.
But are they? Are they? Or I think that's a fun narrative that people like to say as well. Losing teams lose in those spots, winning teams win in those spots. But at the end of the day, is that the case, or is it just sports are played by human beings who there are a bunch of little decisions made throughout these games, and sometimes they make the right one, sometimes they make the worst one, sometimes the ball bounces the right way or the wrong way. And
when Jalen Polk
happen.
doesn't catch a pass all year, I'm not going to expect him late in the game to be able to get both feet down and make a play.
He wasn't that bad up until that point. Well, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and defend you.
I will give you the floor to defend Jalen Polk if you want.
He was arguably their best player in training camp. I swear to God. He was not, maybe
not being the best player in the training camp of a 3-win team.
I know. Well, yeah, that's my big lesson from the Patriots this season was to not put stock in training camp, because Tyquan Thornton looked good in training camp. Jalen Polk looked excellent in training camp, and none of it mattered. So I'm done buying into what I see in training camp practices. That's for sure.
Good. All right. I think let's put a pin in it there. Dakota Randall, Logan Mullen, thank you very much for joining me and us. And we'll be back next week, Lord permitting, asteroid permitting, nuclear holocaust permitting. But this has been NPC Sports. I have been Ben Watanabe, and have a great one.